The night air carried the restless hum of the city, a steady rhythm of engines, distant voices, and the flicker of neon lights bouncing off the glass towers that lined the streets. It was the kind of evening where the world felt alive yet strangely hollow, filled with noise but lacking warmth. Cars rushed past with impatient horns and flashing headlights. People hurried along sidewalks with phones pressed to their ears. And somewhere down the block, a stray dog darted into an alley, its shadow swallowed by the glow of a street lamp. Among it all, a small figure moved quietly along the sidewalk. Lily Peterson clutched the straps of her faded backpack, the weight of her schoolbooks pressing against her shoulders as she quickened her steps. At 7 years old, she had already learned the rules of being careful. Don't talk to strangers. Don't linger too long. Keep to the light. Get home before the streets grew to dark. Her blonde hair caught streaks of light from the lamps above, flashing like pale ribbons as she hurried forward, her sneakers tapping a soft rhythm against the cracked pavement. She wasn't afraid exactly, but she was cautious in a way most children her age didn't have to be. Then came a sound that made her stop. It wasn't the ordinary chorus of the city, a horn honking once. Then silence, or the buzz of traffic, weaving through the avenues. This sound was different. It was sharp and constant. A car horn pressed down without pause, droning into the night like a warning that refused to be ignored. Lily froze, her small fists tightening around the straps of her backpack as the sound cut through her chest. It dragged on endlessly, louder and harsher than the rest of the city's noise, demanding her attention. Her eyes darted across the street. That was when she saw it. A car sat crookedly near the curb, its headlights spilling pale light across the asphalt. The angle was wrong, as though it had rolled to a stop without care, leaning into the edge of the sidewalk like a tired beast. The windows were fogged slightly, catching the glow of the lamps in hazy reflections. The horn blared from inside, pressing down on her ears until she winced. For a moment, Lily thought maybe it was some kind of prank. Maybe someone had abandoned the car, or a teenager had thought it funny to lean on the horn. But something about it felt wrong. Her stomach twisted in a way that told her this wasn't a game. She swallowed hard and stepped off the curb, crossing the street carefully, her sneakers tapping against the pavement as she drew closer. The closer she came, the louder it grew, until it felt like the noise was inside her head. She reached the driver's side window, rose on tiptoes, and pressed her small hands against the glass to peer inside. Her breath caught immediately. A man sat behind the wheel, his head slumped heavily against it, his weight pressing the horn into its endless scream. His broad shoulders were sagging forward in a light blue suit, his dark hair falling across his forehead. His face, illuminated by the faint glow of the dashboard, was pale to pale. His chest rose only in shallow, uncertain movements. His eyes were closed, and for one terrifying moment Lily thought he might already be gone. She stumbled back a step, her heart hammering against her ribs so hard it hurt. She was just a child, standing alone in the middle of the city, staring at a stranger who looked as though he had fallen into some silent, deadly sleep. Her first thought was to run, find an adult, call for help. Somewhere, surely, someone would know what to do. But the street was strangely empty. Cars sped past, their drivers to focus on their own destinations, to notice the crooked car or the little girl standing beside it. No one slowed, no one turned their head. And Lily realized with a cold jolt that if she wasted time looking for help, this man might not have any time left. Fear prickled up her spine, making her legs feel heavy, urging her to step back, to walk away, to let the night swallow her again. But another voice, softer and stronger, rose inside her. It whispered that she couldn't leave him. Not like this. Not when he was so close and so helpless. Her hands trembled as she reached for the car door handle. For a second, she prayed it would be locked, that the choice would be taken from her, that she could tell herself she had tried and walk away. But when she pulled, the handle gave way easily. The door swung open, the horn roaring in her ears like a monster's cry. The smell of leather and cologne hit her, sharp and unfamiliar. She stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the man, her breath fast and shallow. He looked like someone important, someone who belonged in a tall building with polished floors and shining windows, not slumped helplessly in a car on the side of the road. He looked untouchable, yet here he was, more fragile than she could have imagined. Lily's small fingers tightened on the door. Her chest ached with fear, but beneath it, a spark of courage flickered. She took a shaky breath, and then, with all the strength she could gather, stepped inside. It was her first step into something far bigger than she had ever faced her. First act of bravery. Asterisk, the silence that followed after Lily pushed the man back from the steering wheel was deafening. The horn stopped mid-scream, leaving only the rush of passing cars and the wild pounding of her own heartbeat in her ears. For a moment she stood frozen, small chest heaving, staring at the stranger slumped in the seat beside her. His body shifted, slightly with each shallow breath, but his face stayed pale, his lips almost colorless. He didn't look like someone who belonged to this world of strength and power. He looked fragile, caught somewhere between life and death. Lily's hands trembled on the edge of the steering wheel. She was 7 years old. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be sitting in the driver's seat of a car that smelled of expensive leather and faint cologne, staring at a man she didn't know but who desperately needed her. Every voice of reason inside her screamed that this was too big, too dangerous, too impossible. But another voice, a quieter one that had never spoken this loudly before, whispered that she had no choice. She glanced through the windshield. The city stretched out ahead in restless light, signs glowing in the distance. Somewhere out there was a hospital. She remembered seeing the Red Cross glowing from car windows when her mother took her on evening walks. It wasn't far but far. Felt enormous now. Asterisk, her small fingers hovered over the keys, still stuck in the ignition. She thought of her father. How he had once taken her into a quiet parking lot and let her sit on his lap, her tiny feet dangling as he explained, "That's the brake. That's the gas. The wheel keeps you steady. Don't fight it. Guide it." She hadn't known she would ever need those words. They had been nothing more than a game then, a memory tied to laughter. Tonight they were all she had. Lily's hand shook as she turned the key. The engine roared awake, louder than she expected, vibrating through her small frame until her teeth rattled. She pressed her foot clumsily on the brake, remembering her father's warning about control. The sound of the engine mixed with the shallow groan of the man beside her, and fear twisted deeper into her stomach. He was still alive, barely. She whispered to herself, "I can do this. I can do this. Please let me do this." With a gulp, she shifted the gear into drive. The car lurched forward suddenly, jerking her small body against the seatbelt. She squeaked, gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Headlights from a car behind them flashed, and a horn blared angrily as she swerved clumsily into the road. The city was not kind to a child behind the wheel. Every second was a battle against the size of the car, against the speed of traffic, against the tidal wave of fear that threatened to swallow her. She sat on the very edge of the seat, leaning forward, her eyes wide and fixed on the glowing path of streetlights ahead. The man groaned faintly, a sound that almost broke her. It meant he was still here, still fighting. It also meant she couldn't stop. She risked a glance at him, the glow from the dashboard painting his features in an eerie light. He looked important, his suit crisp even as his body sagged, his wrist heavy with a gold watch that glinted faintly, but none of that mattered now. He was just a man, helpless, and she was the only thing keeping him tethered to life. A red light loomed up ahead, cars lined neatly across the intersection. Lily's heart shot into her throat. Stopping wasn't an option. Every second wasted was a second stolen from him. She pressed down harder on the gas. The cars roared rising as she barreled forward. Horns exploded all around her as drivers screeched their brakes. A taxi swerved so close that its headlights blinded her for a heartbeat. She screamed, jerking the wheel, the tires shrieking in protest. The car shot through the intersection by a miracle of seconds, and then she was clear. Her whole body trembled, tears gathering in her eyes. She forced herself not to cry. If she cried, she wouldn't see. She sniffled hard, wiped her cheek with the back of her hand, and whispered again, "Hold on. Please hold on." The city seemed louder than ever now, every horn sharper, every flash of light blinding. A delivery truck roared past, its horn blasting like thunder. The blast rattled her so badly she nearly swerved into the curb. She corrected, clumsily, her arms straining against the oversized wheel. Sweat slicked her palms, making the leather slippery. And then, for just a moment, she thought she heard the man whisper. It was so faint she wasn't sure if it was real, but it sounded like a word, like he was trying to reach her. From somewhere deep in the dark, that faint sound gave her something to cling to. She had to keep going. She had to. She fixed her gaze on the road ahead, where a faint red glow marked the distant hospital sign she had seen before. It looked impossibly far, but it was there, a beacon calling her forward. Her small voice cracked as she spoke, barely above a whisper, but determined all the same. I'll get you there. I promise. The city opened up before Lily like a battlefield of light and motion. Cars streaked past, their headlights blazing like angry eyes, horns stabbing into the night with a violence that made her flinch each time. She sat stiff in the driver's seat, her small body dwarfed by the massive machine she was trying to control, her tiny feet barely brushing the pedals. Every second felt stretched thin, every moment sharpened with danger. She was too young, too small, but she was the only one here, and the man beside her, this powerful-looking stranger, was breathing slower with each block. Her knuckles burned, wide against the wheel, the leather slippery with sweat. She leaned forward, her blue eyes locked onto the glowing stretch of asphalt ahead, whispering under her breath the same words again and again like a prayer. Hold on, don't leave me. The traffic around her surged. A cluster of cars sped past on her left, blinding her with their lights. A driver rolled down his window to shout, his voice lost in the rush. But she caught the anger in his tone. She wanted to scream back, I'm saving someone's life. But she didn't. She couldn't waste even a second. The man groaned faintly beside her, his head tipping against the seat, his lips moving but no words escaping. The sound broke something inside her. For an instant, fear rose so strong she wanted to stop, to abandon the car in the middle of the road, to curl up and cry. But then she remembered her mother's soft voice, years ago, whispering while tucking her into bed, courage isn't about being big. Courage is doing what's needed, even when you're afraid. Lily swallowed hard and straightened her back, hands clenching tighter on the wheel. A siren wailed in the distance. It grew louder, closer, until red and blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror. Panic surged through her chest. The police. What would they see? A car swerving wildly through the city, driven by a child who could barely see over the dashboard. They would stop her. They would pull her out, and the man beside her would be left to die before he reached the hospital. No, please, she whispered desperately, her foot pressing the gas harder. The car surged forward, engine groaning under the strain. The siren howled behind her, weaving closer, but Lily refused to stop. She clutched the wheel tighter, her body shaking, eyes darting between the road and the pulsing lights in her mirror. The hospital sign was closer now, still blocks away, but closer. The police car closed the distance, its horn blaring, its speaker crackling with words she couldn't understand over the chaos. She swerved suddenly, cutting down a narrower street lined with shuttered shops. Tires squealed against the pavement, and the heavy car jolted so hard she nearly lost control. Her body slammed against the seatbelt, knocking the air from her lungs, but she held on. For a heartbeat. The road was empty. The sirens faded behind her. The only sound was the roar of the engine and the faint, shallow breaths of the man slumped at her side. She risked a glance at him. His skin looked even paler now, his lips trembling faintly as though he was fighting some invisible battle. Don't you dare give up, she whispered fiercely. I'm not stopping. Her eyes blurred with tears, but she blinked them away, forcing herself to focus. The street narrowed further. A delivery truck parked halfway into the lane. She gasped, jerking the wheel. The car scraped dangerously close to the truck, metal screaming as it brushed along its side. Sparks flew briefly in her window. She ducked, crying out, but kept her grip tight, her arms burning as she fought the wheel back into control. The hospital. Lights came into view again as the narrow street opened onto a wide avenue. The glowing red cross shimmered faintly against the night sky. And for the first time since climbing into the car, Lily felt something other than fear. Hope. It wasn't over. She could make it. But hope lasted only a moment. Another red light loomed ahead, this one with cars already blocking the intersection, headlights facing her like a wall of fire. She slammed her foot onto the brake, but her small leg couldn't press hard enough, couldn't stop the weight of the car in time. Panic shot through her as the car barreled forward, faster and faster toward the crossing traffic. She screamed, throwing her whole body into the brake pedal, arms yanking the wheel wildly. Tires screeched, rubber burned. The car swerved violently, spinning half sideways into the intersection. For a second, everything blurred, horns exploding, lights flashing, metal roaring as brakes locked on every side. A taxi missed her by inches. A delivery van skidded to a halt, its bumper almost kissing her door. The car jolted to a stop crookedly in the middle of the road. Silence fell, broken only by the faint ticking of the cooling engine. Lily sat frozen, chest heaving, her fingers locked so tight on the steering wheel she couldn't let go. And then she heard the man beside her, whispering something so faint it was almost lost. His lips moved again, and this time she caught it, a single word, rasped with the last of his strength: help. Her entire body trembled. The word wasn't just a plea, it was a command, a tether pulling her forward. She blinked through her tears, lifted her chin, and pressed the gas again. The hospital was close now. Too close to stop. The car rolled forward again, its engine growling like some restless beast beneath Lily's trembling hands. Her heart still thundered from the near crash, her throat raw from the scream she hadn't even realized had torn out of her. The intersection she had just survived lay behind her, horns blaring in furious protest. But she didn't dare look back. Every ounce of her being was fixed on what lay ahead. The hospital sign glowed faintly in the distance, a red cross against the dark, like a lighthouse for a ship about to sink. The man beside her stirred again, weakly, his head lolled toward her shoulder, his lips parting in a shallow breath. She could see the sweat beating at his temple, the uneven rise of his chest. He looked nothing like the powerful figure she imagined he must be. His suit, once crisp and commanding, now hung on him like armor slipping from a fallen soldier. His gold watch glinted faintly, catching the city's neon glare, but even that looked useless now, powerless to buy him another second of life. Lily felt something hot sting her eyes, but she refused to cry. She pressed her lips together, a thin, determined line. "I'll get you there," she whispered fiercely. "I promise." The road ahead was wide, but it wasn't safe. The city never was. A siren wailed again, this time closer, echoing through the steel and glass towers like a hunting wolf. Her tiny hand slipped against the steering wheel as sweat slicked her palms. She wiped one against her dress quickly, her arms tightening, fighting to steady the car. Then the rain started. It came suddenly, as if the night had been waiting to test her further. Drops splattered against the windshield, first a sprinkle, then a downpour. The wipers, still switched off, stayed frozen in place, and water smeared across the glass in glittering sheets. The hospital lights blurred. The road became a glistening mirror that distorted everything. Lily gasped, reaching desperately for the wiper switch. She fumbled along the unfamiliar knobs, her fingers too small to grip them properly. At last, she pulled one, and the wiper screeched across the glass, jerking back and forth, smearing more than they cleared. Still, it was better than nothing. The car jolted as she overcorrected, the tires slipping on the slick pavement. Her body slammed against the seatbelt, the strap biting into her chest. Horns wailed as a pair of cars swerved to avoid her. One driver stuck his head out the window, shouting curses she couldn't hear over the pounding of the rain and the thundering of her own pulse. She blinked furiously, wiping the tears and rain from her eyes. "Stay awake," she begged the man beside her. "Please, please, don't leave me now." A gurgling sound came from his throat, and for an instant, she thought it was his last. Panic clawed at her, but it also pushed her harder. She pressed the accelerator, ignoring the danger, ignoring the way the car fishtailed across the slick street. The Red Cross sign was closer now too, maybe 3 blocks away, but those blocks looked endless, stretched by the storm, by the chaos, by her fear. A truck barreled out of a side street without warning, its horn blaring, its massive shape blotting out the glow of the hospital. Lily's heart stopped. She yanked the wheel with every ounce of strength in her tiny arms. The car skidded sideways, tires screaming against wet asphalt. For a moment, she saw nothing but headlights, white and blinding. Then, by some miracle, the car spun just enough to miss the truck's front bumper by inches. The back and clipped the corner of the truck, the impact jolting her so hard she bit her lip, tasting blood. The car spun in a dizzying half-circle, rain spraying across the windshield. Lily screamed but didn't let go. She clung to the wheel, eyes wide, her small body trembling like a leaf caught in a storm. At last, the car slammed to a halt against the curb, tilted awkwardly, engine still growling. For a long second, the world was silent. Only the hiss of rain and the ticking of the engine filled her ears. Her body shook violently, but her hands still clutched the wheel. She turned her head slowly. The man's chest still moved, shallow, uneven, but it moved. Relief punched through her so strongly she nearly sobbed, but she couldn't stop now. Not when she was this close. She straightened the car with jerky movements, forcing it back onto the street. The hospital lights blazed brighter now, just ahead, shining through the storm like a beacon. She pressed the gas again, ignoring the way her legs trembled, ignoring the ache in her arms. The emergency entrance came into view, a line of ambulances under bright lamps. Paramedics rushing in and out. Her breath hitched. She was almost there. But one last obstacle remained. The driveway was blocked. Ambulances, cars, and people crowded the entrance like a wall, leaving no clear path through. Her heart raced faster than ever. She slammed her hand against the wheel, frustration and fear boiling together. There was no way around, no time to stop. The man beside her gave a faint, rattling breath, and it was enough. She gritted her teeth, pressed the horn with her tiny fist, and steered straight for the crowd. The car blared its cry into the night, louder even than the storm. Nurses turned. A guard shouted. Lights flashed. People scattered in shock as the car barreled forward, swerving hard at the last second into the narrowest gap between two ambulances. Tires screeched. The car shuddered, but somehow, impossibly, it slid to a halt under the glowing canopy of the emergency entrance. The silence that followed was unreal. Rain poured around her. Nurses and paramedics stood frozen, staring in disbelief at the child who gripped the wheel. Her face pale and streaked with tears, Lily swallowed hard, her voice shaking as she whispered the only word she could find. He needs help, please, now. Asterisk rain poured down in silver sheets as the car sat crookedly under the emergency entrance, steam rising from the hood like the breath of an exhausted beast. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Nurses stood frozen under the canopy, paramedics clutching stretchers mid-step, all of them staring wide-eyed at the unbelievable sight. A little girl no taller than the wheel itself, hands trembling on the leather, blue eyes wide with fear and determination. Then the spell shattered. A guard rushed forward, shouting, "What in God's name?" But his words died when he saw the unconscious man slumped against the passenger seat, his head lolling toward the child. Panic rippled through the staff. Shouts overlapped, footsteps thundered, and the bright emergency lights cut across the rain like lightning. Lily's chest rose and fell in ragged breaths. She had done the impossible, but now she was frozen. Small hands still locked on the wheel as though letting go would make the world collapse. A nurse yanked the car door open, gasping when she saw the man. Oh my God. That's she didn't finish. Her training snapped into place with a quick motion. She slid an arm around his shoulders, calling for help. The paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, their movements sharp and practiced. The man was pulled from the car, his limp body collapsing onto the gurney, the rain soaking his pale face as oxygen masks and wires were readied in frantic hands. Through it all, Lily remained in the driver's seat, small fingers digging into the steering wheel until her knuckles ached. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her whole body shook violently, the adrenaline draining from her little frame. A nurse crouched beside her door, her voice soft but urgent. "Sweetheart, are you hurt? How did you?" The words caught in her throat as realization dawned. This child had driven the car here, through the city, alone. Lily blinked, tears cutting through the rain on her cheeks. Her voice came out in a whisper, so fragile it was nearly lost in the storm. He fainted. I didn't know what else to do." The nurse stared at her, stunned, then reached out, unbuckling the seatbelt and lifting the trembling girl into her arms. Lily sagged against her, too exhausted to resist. She turned her head just enough to see the gurney disappearing into the sliding glass doors. The man's figure strapped down, doctors surrounding him, machines already beeping in warning tones. Her throat tightened. "Don't let him die," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Please don't let him die." Inside, the hospital erupted into chaos. The automatic doors hissed open, and Lily caught glimpses of the blinding white lights. The frantic rush of shoes against tile, the clipped voices barking orders, blood pressure crashing. "Get the crash cart. We're losing him." Asterisk, they wheeled him into a trauma room, the glass walls blurring with condensation as machines screamed. Lily was set gently onto a bench just outside, her small frame dwarfed by the adult world that had swallowed her whole. She sat there, knees pulled to her chest, hugging her backpack like a shield. The sounds beyond the glass were terrifying, the steady thump of CPR, the metallic clang of instruments, the endless alarm of a monitor that refused to find a rhythm. Her Mind replayed every moment of the drive in jagged flashes, the blaring horns, the near crashes, the rain blinding her, his faint whisper, "Help." She pressed her palms over her ears, but the sounds wouldn't stop, either from the memory or from the room beyond. Doctors fought with practiced urgency. Pads were pressed to his chest. Clear, a jolt of electricity lifted his body from the table. Lily flinched, her own body jerking as if she had been struck to. For a terrifying second, there was nothing but a flat, unbroken tone, then faint. Stuttering, the monitor picked up a rhythm again, weak, unsteady, but alive. Relief crashed over her so hard she almost collapsed sideways on the bench. She didn't even realize she was crying until the nurse beside her wiped a tear from her cheek. "You did everything you could, sweetheart," the woman murmured. "You got him here. You saved him." But Lily shook her head fiercely, stubborn even through her sobs. "Not me. I just drove. They're the ones saving him." The nurse looked at her with eyes shining, torn between awe and disbelief. "No, darling, you gave him the chance. Without you, he'd never have made it this far." Inside the trauma room, the flurry of motion slowed. Doctors exchanged tense words. Then one of them finally exhaled. "He's stable for now." The relief spread through the staff like a wave, shoulders dropping, voices softening. The man's chest rose and fell under the mask, faint but steadier than before, through the glass. Lily's gaze locked on him. She didn't know his name, didn't know why fate had chosen her to be the one standing here, but in that moment, she understood something with a clarity beyond her years. She had carried him when no one else could. His life was tied to hers now in a way she couldn't explain, and somewhere deep in the hospital, whispers were already beginning among the staff, not about the man though his identity would soon rock the city, but about the little girl with rain in her hair and fire in her eyes. The child who had done what no adult had dared. Asterisk, the night was far from over. Asterisk, the hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting long shadows across the sterile halls. The storm outside still rattled against the windows, thunder echoing through the city like a warning bell. But inside the walls of the emergency wing, a different storm brewed. Doctors moved in and out of the trauma room, their faces tight with urgency, their voices clipped with orders and counter-orders. Monitors beeped unevenly, machines hissed with bursts of oxygen, and every sound seemed to pierce Lily's small frame as she sat curled on the bench outside. Her knees hugged her chest, her backpack clutched tight against her body, but her wide eyes never left the figure inside the room. The man lay surrounded by wires and tubes, a battlefield of medicine fighting to drag him back from the edge. His chest rose with the mechanical rhythm of the ventilator, his skin still pale under the harsh light. Lily had seen him move once, whisper once, but now he was as still as stone. The sight hollowed her, yet she couldn't look away. A nurse knelt beside her, pressing a blanket over her trembling shoulders. "You are very brave," she whispered gently. "Do you know who that man is?" Lily shook her head, strands of wet blonde hair clinging to her cheeks. Her voice came out small and cracked. "I just found him. He fainted in the car. I couldn't leave him." The nurse hesitated, glancing back toward the trauma room. Whispers spread like wildfire between the staff and identity to heavy, to shocking, to ignore. One doctor muttered a name under his breath, and another's eyes widened. Soon, orderlies were leaning close, their expressions flickering between disbelief and awe. Asterisk, Lily caught pieces of their hushed voices. Alexander Grant, CEO, worth billions, collapsed right at the wheel. The words meant little to her. To Lily, he wasn't a headline or a titan of industry. He was just the man whose life had been cradled in her tiny, trembling hands as she pressed the gas pedal with all the strength her legs could give. But the adults looked at him differently. Their gazes held something she didn't understand: fear, respect, and curiosity tangled together. The glass door hissed open and a tall doctor stepped out, pulling off his gloves with a snap. His voice was low, urgent. "He's stable," but it was close. Another 5 minutes. He shook his head. He wouldn't be here. Every iron. The corridor shifted to the little girl wrapped in a blanket, her shoes dripping rainwater onto the towel. For a long, breathless moment, silence stretched. Then the nurse who had helped Lily earlier spoke softly, but firmly. It was her. She drove him here. Gasps rippled through the hall. A paramedic muttered, "Impossible." Another whispered, "Through this weather, that traffic." But their disbelief faltered when they looked into Lily's eyes, still wide and wet. but burning with the stubborn courage of someone who had already faced fear and refused to let it win. The doctor crouched to her level, his brow furrowed in awe. "Sweetheart, do you understand what you did tonight?" Lily blinked at him, confusion written across her face. "I just didn't want him to die." Behind them, the sliding doors burst open. Men in dark suits rushed in, their shoes clicking sharply against the tile. Their voices were urgent, clipped with authority. Security detail bodyguards who had been missing for just long enough to let disaster strike. They demanded upgrades, their faces pale beneath their stoic masks. "Where is he? What's his condition?" The doctor straightened, his tone sharp. "Alive, thanks to her." He gestured toward Lily, who shrank slightly under the weight of so many eyes. One of the suited men turned, his gaze locking on the child. For a moment, his stern face cracked into disbelief. "A child?" he muttered. His hand trembled as he rubbed his temple. He would have been gone if not for her. The room thickened with tension. The most powerful man in the city lay on the edge of death, and the one who had saved him was a 7-year-old girl who looked as though she belonged nowhere. Near such a storm, the doors to the trauma room hissed open again, and this time the air shifted. Alexander Grant stirred faintly, his chest rising on its own beneath the wires and tubes. His eyes fluttered, heavy, reluctant, but for the first time, alive. Lily leaned forward instinctively, her small hands gripping the edge of the bench. She didn't breathe until his gaze, unfocused and clouded with exhaustion, lifted slightly. For a fleeting moment, their eyes met through the haze of glass and light. His lips parted, and the faintest whisper escaped a single word that seemed meant for her alone. "Angel." The machines beeped steadily now, a fragile rhythm of survival. The staff shifted, murmuring in astonishment, but Lily barely heard them. The word echoed in her chest, warming her against the storm that still howled outside. She had been called many things in her life, child, girl, to small, to weak, but never that. Never someone's angel. Security hurried to make calls. Journalists already swarmed at the edges of the hospital. The story of a billionaire collapsing at the wheel spreading like fire through the city. But none of that mattered to Lily. All that mattered was that he was alive, that he had seen her, that in his darkest moment, he had given her a name she would never forget. The night wasn't finished yet. This was only the beginning of a bond that neither power nor wealth could have written, only fate, and the courage of a child who refused to walk away. Asterisk, the night bled in the morning, but the storm outside had not calmed. Rain still hammered the glass walls of the hospital, thunder rolling like a drumbeat of destiny. Inside, however, the air was electric in a different way. News had spread faster that lightning and Empire's leader had fallen in the dark streets of the city, and his savior was not a doctor, not a guard, not even an adult, but a child no older than 7. By the time dawn began to pale the sky, cameras had gathered at the gates. Microphones pressed against security guards who stood rigid at the entrances, refusing to let the outside world swallow the fragile miracle that had unfolded inside. In the waiting room, Lily sat small and silent in a chair too big for her, her legs dangling inches above the floor. She had changed into hospital clothes, her soaked dress and shoes left drying somewhere. A nurse had brushed her hair, but the strands still clung to her face, golden and stubborn. She stared down at her backpack, the straps frayed from years of use, now damp and stained with rain. The world buzzed around her, doctors passing, phones ringing, security moving like shadows, but she heard none of it. Her mind replayed the night in sharp fragments, the horn, the rain, the endless roar of traffic, the whisper of Angel. Then the door at the end of the corridor opened, and silence fell like a curtain. The doctors emerged first, their faces stern but softened with relief. Behind them came 2 men in dark suits, and between their tall frames, wheeled on a bed with monitors beeping steadily, lay Alexander Grant. His eyes were half open now, clearer than before, though shadowed with exhaustion. Even in weakness, his presence filled the hall. He was the kind of man people whispered about, the kind of man whose name moved markets, whose decisions shaped cities, and yet here, he was a man brought back to life by the smallest hands in the room. The bed slowed, and Alexander turned his head slightly. His gaze found Lily immediately, as though he had been searching for her all along. The corners of his lips moved, a faint, almost disbelieving smile ghosting his pale face. The room held its breath as he spoke, voice raspy, but strong enough to carry. "You." His eyes softened, fixing on her with a strange reverence. "You saved me." Lily shifted nervously in her chair, her small fingers knotting the blanket around her shoulders. She whispered back, her voice nearly lost in the hum of machines. I just didn't want you to die." The weight of her words struck the room harder than any headline could. Doctors exchanged glances, some with tears shining in their eyes. Security men bowed their heads. Even the nurse, who had helped Lily earlier, pressed a hand to her mouth, as though trying to stop the sob rising in her throat. Alexander lifted a trembling hand, and for a moment it looked impossible that he could reach her. But Lily stood, her small feet patting softly against the tile, and stepped closer. She slipped her tiny hand into his. The contrast almost unreal, her fragile fingers against his broad palm. A child anchoring a man who had commanded empires. His chest rose sharply, as though the touch itself breathed strength back into him. The world outside the hospital doors surged with frenzy. Headlines screamed, "Millionaire CEO collapses saved by 7-year-old hero." Satellite trucks parked on sidewalks. Reporters scrambled for details. And the city buzzed with a story that felt too strange to be real. Yet inside, none of that mattered. In the quiet of the hospital corridor, it was only him and her. A man who had everything but almost lost it, and a girl who had nothing but gave him everything. Later that day, when Alexander was stable enough to speak to the press, the hospital set up a podium in the lobby. Journalists flooded the room, cameras flashing. The storm outside still raging, but muffled by walls and glass. Alexander, pale but upright, stood flanked by doctors. The crowd hushed when he raised a hand. "I built my life believing strength meant control," he began, his voice low but steady, each word deliberate. "But last night, when I lost control, when death sat beside me in a car I could no longer drive, it wasn't power or wealth or guards that saved me. It was a little girl, a stranger, a child who should never have had to face what she faced, but who showed a courage far greater than anything I've ever known." The cameras clicked wildly. Reporters scribbled furiously, but Alexander's gaze never left Lily, who stood at the side clutching her backpack, her cheeks pink with embarrassment. "This child," he continued, his voice breaking for the first time, "is my angel. Without her, I would not be here. She gave me back my life, and I will not waste it." He paused, emotion tightening his throat. "From this day forward, I vow to stand for the kind of bravery she showed, not in boardrooms, not in numbers, but in the lives of ordinary people who often go unseen." The room erupted in applause, but Lily only shifted awkwardly, unsure how to respond. Alexander gestured for her to join him. She hesitated, then walked forward. When she reached his side, he took her hand again and raised it high for the cameras to see. The flashbulbs caught her wide, uncertain eyes, the faint smile tugging at her lips. The innocence of a child wrapped in the gravity of a miracle. The world would remember Alexander Grant as a titan of business, but from that day on, his legacy carried a different weight. The story of the night when power collapsed in a storm, and a little girl with trembling hands took the wheel, and Lily, once just a shadow in the crowd, had become something more. Not just a child, not just a girl, walking home in the rain, but a symbol of courage that even the greatest men could look up to. The storm finally broke outside, the rain easing, the clouds parting to reveal the first fragile streaks of morning light. In that glow, the bond between the billionaire and the child was sealed to lives forever tied by one night, one promise, and one word whispered in the dark: "Angel."